Welcome to A Framework for All, Building Capacity for Service Delivery. This presentation is one session within a strand aligned to the Journal of Catholic Education's special issue on inclusion in Catholic schools. Now, please notice that QR code at the bottom of the presentation. It will take you to the special issue.
All right, let's get started. I'm Dr. Michael Fagella-Luby, and wanted to share a little bit as we get started here about who I am. I started, like many of you, as a Catholic school educator. I was in Jacksonville, Florida, where I was a teacher of both English and chemistry, as well as a school administrator. From there, I got really interested in what happens when not all kids respond equally to the instruction that we deliver. So I actually went to the University of Kansas to get my doctorate, expanding the view of how do we in Catholic schools meet the needs of all children. Today, I actually find myself as the director of the Answers Institute and the Alice Neely Special Education Research and Service Institute at Texas Christian University, where I do work in a variety of areas that you think about every day. I think about the instruction cycle. How is it that we work with students and engage in learning, literacy, especially for those kids in 4th through 12th grade. And then our topic for today, I like to think a lot about what are the systems around you as a teacher or you as an administrator that help all kids be successful. It's so meaningful in our jobs when that's the case. So these are some of the areas that I really think about in my professional career. But there's one other really critical component for me when I think about this particular presentation, and it's this. This is my son, Jack. He is a 4th grader. You can see him there dancing like nobody's watching, except maybe his dad, and a very proud dad. Dad who's watched him to learn during our pandemic, there on his computer doing his best. A young man who loves to show us in nature all the places that he likes to go, especially behind his school. There's a giant area in the woods that he loves. But also you can see there a boy who's got ADHD, a boy who has OCD, and a boy who struggles to fit in all the things that school requires. So there's both a professional and a personal side to this story for me.
And I'm Christy Bonfiglio, and I was trained as a school psychologist with expertise in service delivery of academic and behavioral interventions. Now, I joined the University of Notre Dame through the Alliance for Catholic Education in 2014 as the director of the Office of Professional Standards. But my heart and my passion belong to this new program, which was launched in 2016, the Program for Inclusive Education, or PI as we like to call it. Now, our mission is to equip Catholic schools with the culture, the knowledge, and the skills to welcome, serve, and celebrate all learners. And I was privileged to serve as a co-editor on this special issue along with Michael and co-author for several articles.
What are we going to do, Christy? What's this session about?
We are going to be looking at a number of things. First of all, we're going to identify a continuum of inclusion models, describing the 5 critical elements of one of our favorites, that multi-tiered systems of support, as well as reflecting on those features and how they might align to your Catholic school.
Yeah, right. So why should you sit through the next half hour, 40 minutes? We're hoping it's because you want to meet the needs of all kids, but you're asking yourself, how can I reasonably do that with the amount of capacity I have? That to me seems like always the big question. And what I love about MTSS as a framework is it's not one size fits all. There's components that we're going to think about. We're doing a lot of these already, but maybe some of them we aren't. And so our hope is at the end of this time together, you've said, we're doing that. Oh, we could do that better. And in the process, you feel empowered to try this in your school. Is that sort of where we want to go, Christy?
Absolutely. So let's get started. In order to build that capacity to meet the needs of learners in your Catholic schools, it's essential that we implement evidence-based frameworks and supports. And one of those critical frameworks is multi-tiered systems of supports. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Now, historically, you would think about it as response to intervention in the academic domain. Perhaps you've seen PBS or PBIS in the literature, and that was the behavioral domain. But what we know is that we would advocate for an integration of both systems. And the newest research is telling us to look into multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. So I want to tell you how we like to frame it. And we use this wonderful analogy of pie, not a pie, but an ice cream sundae. So let me tell you what it looks like. So MTSS is an ice cream sundae. And if I were having this fabulous Sunday party, I would invite you all to my home. And we would be serving all sorts of ice cream. We see tier 1 as that ice cream, but not just any ice cream. We're talking good quality Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs, and all sorts of flavors, strawberry and chocolate and vanilla, because what we know is that we need a diversity of ice cream to meet the needs of everyone at the party. Now, when we're thinking about that as far as MTSS goes, this is your good quality instruction. We want to make sure we're differentiating to meet the needs of all students. And with a behavioral plan, we want a good classroom support, a management plan that's going to meet the needs of most of your students. Now, we know that's only about 80 to 85%, and only about 80 to 85% of you at my party are going to be satisfied with a scoop of ice cream. So let me tell you what tier 2 looks like. Now, tier 2 is the ice cream plus the sauce. We have chocolate sauce and caramel sauce and butterscotch sauce. And I'm not just going to give you a spoon and let you eat out of the jar, because you need the ice cream plus the sauce. And that's what we do with MTSS as well. We give you good quality instruction, and then we add some targeted interventions. Those might be small groups for reading in your classroom. And for behavior, it might be a social skills group or a friendship group. We're giving you a little extra because that's what you need. And in tier 2, we would see that 80 to 85% plus an additional 10 to 15%. But that leaves a small portion of you who still are saying, Christy, I need more. What else do you have to serve me? So in tier 3, we're looking at the sprinkles. So we have the sauce, we add the sprinkles, and those are the individual interventions. Those are the interventions, maybe one-on-one reading instruction. It might be a behavior intervention plan for that kiddo who needs just a bit more. We're going to teach them necessary skills on a one-on-one setting. And so when we're looking at the entire ice cream party, we have our ice cream, we have our sauce. We've added that additional 5% of those of you who are saying, give me sprinkles. But what I want you to understand is that just a few of you may need a little bit more. And that is what we call special education. Now, special education is the cherry on top. So we want you to think about MTSS in terms of general education for tiers 1, 2, and 3. What we're doing as educators, it's in the classroom. We're providing the differentiation. We're providing small group instruction. We're providing some one-on-one supports. It's only if our needs are not being met with good quality ice cream and sauce and sprinkles that we go and we refer for that cherry on top. So when we're talking about RTI and we're talking about PBIS, I wanted to let you know that there are lots of similarities, as you can see that nice little white box there in the middle, but there are some differences too. But because of the similarities, we need to think about integrating them. It's practical, and the resources then can be shared. In addition, I would contend it's difficult to separate behavior from academics, and therefore we should approach them together. Now, MTSS, let's integrate it, the multiple tiered systems into one coherent system. Now, we know, again, RTI and PBIS, they go well together. And we see the implementation of these tiered systems in 1 out of every 5 schools in the United States because they have high social significance. It works.
All right, so I'm sitting here, I'm listening, I'm a Catholic school educator, maybe I'm an administrator, and I'm thinking, great, Christy, I want some ice cream. I'm hungry too. And I'm thinking that, okay, well, how does this all fit for me? Because we don't have special education. We don't have always those same services. We don't think about special programs. That our public school partners tend to do that. But I think the challenge that you and I wrote about in this article is that if we genuinely want to meet the needs of all the kids who come through our doors, all of God's children, then we have to be open to this idea of an inclusion journey. This idea that as my school, I want to be thinking about kind of the gate, right? In Catholicism here, the gate of who's in and who's out, and how do we do that? And then I think the thing that we all are really responsible to, and it's probably the thing that motivates us the most, is if we take a kid into our school, if we welcome them into our community, how do we ensure we can meet those kids' needs? And the reality is, we should say right up front, right? Because we work with folks all over the country in Catholic schools where, of course, you have kids with disabilities in your schools because you have kids with dyslexia in your schools, kids with dysgraphia in your school, all kinds of learning disabilities. But there's a host of God's children that we're thinking about meeting the needs of. And this inclusion journey is very much from exclusion, where the kids who are different, with or without disability, speaking English as a first language or not, high poverty, what are the things that keep them out? And that first model on the left is sort of exclusion, right? How is it that maybe we don't let them in? Maybe our schools function and those kids don't get in. But then we start asking ourselves as a community a different set of questions. We say, well, how can we move those kiddos, include them in some way? And some of our Catholic schools, we were just working with some schools, you and I and Sean, where there's sort of a segregated model. They had a separate school for kids with disabilities. And a classmate of mine in the ACE program at Notre Dame, when he got there, he said, we could integrate these kids in some ways. He said, it's good that we're meeting these kids' needs. We have their services met, but actually, what if we were to integrate these kids into one of our local Catholic schools? Actually, they split them across 2 schools, didn't they? So then you started to see a school move from segregation, where they were kind of included but in a different place, to now they come into the building. Now they're in the same schools, but maybe they're in special classes. Maybe they spend less than, well, in our opinion, it would be anything less than 80% of the day with their typical achieving peers is some sort of integrated model, because you may deliver services in school, you may have special classes, but ultimately they get to see each other throughout the day. My kid goes to this Catholic school, right? But we want to move us as a community from exclusion and segregation, integration. There's sort of a reason there's a line there, is we want to move towards this idea of inclusion, this idea that how do we structure things so that all kids can be accepted, because these positives come out of growth. And that's one of the things we talk about in the article, is sort of what are these positives that come out of inclusion. And so in order to pull this off, it's okay if you're sitting in the audience right now, or maybe you're at home because we're doing this virtually, and you're saying to yourself, yeah, Mike, a great idea, but how do you pull that off? And I think what we want to do is connect this idea of really yummy ice cream. And I'm totally ready for ice cream now. You've got me convinced. I want to think about, well, what would that mean for me? How do I make this journey? And the way you and I have always conceptualized this, and the thing that got me, I was a doc student in 2002, where the National Center on Learning Disabilities was really focusing on this idea of RTI, or what became MTSS. And having just stepped out of my Catholic school administrator role, I would genuinely ask our audience, reflect on this. I'm going to describe here 5 things. You tell me, which of these 5 things do you think doesn't work, doesn't hold enough water to live in your school? Because I think you'd say, actually, after you think about these 5 things, they're really defensible. They really make sense. And what's more, you and I have written about how there's a lot of research to support Catholic schools, public schools, however we do this, that these are the components we want to make sure are in place. Is that sort of a fair start? Absolutely. So we're going to go from ice cream to 5 components. You got the ice cream, and I'm stuck with, okay, fine, I'll do the dry stuff. That's good. Well, all right. So I'm not going to, we've talked about this. Our job is not to talk at you, right? And unfortunately, we're in this virtual format. But we want to sort of tell you, what are you going to find in this article? What are the things you can walk away with? And the first thing is this idea of multiple tiers, right? Different kids need different things at different times. And your ice cream sundae there, it sort of reminds me that really, if we're to think about the differences between kids with and without disabilities, atypical and typical, whatever you want to say about your school, it's really about, well, let's pick practice, right? Some of you needed 3 examples of a math problem when you were a kid, and you're off to the races and you got it. Somebody else needed, 16 of those problems. Somebody else in class needed 19 of those problems. Somebody needed 21, 25, 40 of those problems. Well, the problem was the teacher only assigned 20 problems for homework. So the kids who fell into that first group of I needed 3, well, maybe I was bored for the rest of the assignment, but the kid who needed 19, it's a sweet spot. That's perfect. These multiple tiers are reminding us that different kids need different things, just like we experienced as learners ourselves. So what are the kinds of things that I'm going to see if I have multiple tiers in place? I'm going to see that my instruction gets intense as I go forward. We're going to do more for kids, not less. Now, I don't mean doing the things for them, but actually meeting their needs with more reading interventions, writing interventions, problem solving or math interventions. I'm always going to need some kind of differentiated instruction, but I'm going to make sure that those research-based interventions target the specific skills, because time is of essence, right? We've got to meet the needs of all those kids. So I want to think about a good core instruction, something in place that's really going to be powerful, the flavor of ice cream Christy likes. And then I'm going to start to move away into what's more individualized in terms of supports. That's the first piece. I mean, we all agree. Different kids need different things at different times. All right, so it's fine. Well, let's try a different one. Do you want to argue with this one? So do kids need research-based instruction? Well, yeah, right? I mean, we have to get away from like, oh, it feels good in my belly that I do it. No, we do the things we know works. I don't know about you. The last time I went to the doctor, I didn't go in and say, so what do you feel like doing today? I was like, no, I want to know what I'm supposed to do, what you're supposed to do, so we get me healthy again, right? But when we think about research-based instruction, you've got the little scrunchie up there in the corner. And that's just always a reminder for me of, I need to stretch myself. I need to stretch through differentiated instruction and matching what am I trying to teach with what's the most powerful way for students to learn that. And there's room here, right? I can have constructivist ways of teaching all the way to much more direct instruction ways of teaching based on what it is I'm teaching, how students are responding to that instruction, and whether or not we're achieving the outcomes we want. So I can get more explicit as I teach, going from a more exploratory way of teaching to actually that sandwich approach to teaching, the cue, do, review, moving all the way to 8 stages of pre-testing kids. Do they have skills, ability level practice, advanced practice, right? You know how to do that kind of stuff. And you also recognize, I was a chemistry teacher for a little while. You would not use a constructivist approach to teach kids how to light a Bunsen burner, would you? I mean, that just wouldn't make sense. So we're going to not use a constructivist approach to teach that. We'll use a more direct instruction. But maybe there's something else like, I've taught them the components of an autobiography, but now they need to write it themselves. I've taught them the components of a poem, but then I need to write that poem themselves. See, there's different purposes for my teaching. So can we agree that, when we see research-based instruction, we're going to see content and skills focused on, and we're going to see ways of teaching that along that continuum still differentiate instruction. And something Christy and I have learned and talk about a lot is this idea of universal design. How do I remove those barriers for kids? And it turns out, and this is one of those like sort of dirty little secrets of what we're trying to share with you, which is that when you remove those barriers for the kids who struggle, by removing those barriers for all kids, everybody takes off. And that's what we really want, right? I mean, that's kind of the direction we're heading in. So that's the first two. Okay. We okay here, Christy? We're doing all right?
You know what? And everyone is going to look at that scrunchie and think very differently now. It's a nice visual for it.
Next time we see one in class, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so part 3, right? So I have different kids need different things, and we need to give them something good. But ultimately, right? How do I know if it's working? How do I know if this is actually the thing that's making a difference for my kids? Well, John Hosp said this really, really well, right? We sometimes know assessment is like it's a dirty word sometimes, right? But it's only a dirty word if we don't use the data to inform our instruction. And so it's so critical that in our school, we know, are we screening kids to make sure that the kids coming in, we know who's at risk and who's not? Are we getting some sort of diagnostic data from those assessments? Are we actually following up with the kids who are below grade level in certain areas? I mean, you as a teacher have had to have had the experience like I have, where you go into class and you've got some high achieving kids and some low achieving kids, and you're not sure how to meet the needs of those low achieving kids. But my student Matthew was a 9th grader reading at the 3rd grade level. I'm supposed to teach him Romeo and Juliet. But that's a fundamental problem. I needed some diagnostic assessment to understand why his dyslexia was getting in the way of reading that text, but that I could use his comprehension, which was incredible, to do other things to help him access those stories, right? Now, the starred one here, I'd sort of point out, and it's sort of, there's a process on the right that I mentioned, but in this kind of assessment, we want to think about formative or progress monitoring. This is by far the best way to measure student growth over time and have the data in time to inform your instructional decision-making. Because summative assessment, which we all know about, the unit test at the end, those kinds of things, the horse is out of the barn. It's running down the hill, Christy. And it's, the kids, did the kid learn it? No. Well, okay, I don't have any time left to reteach it. So what do I do? Well, we want to make sure we still need outcome measures, but we need all four of these kinds of assessment to inform our instruction. And in the article, we sort of talk about that. Where would they be appropriate? How could they fit into what we're doing? All right. Fourth part here to think about. So if I embrace these practices and I'm trying these things and I'm measuring whether or not they're working, I have to be open to the idea. It was one of our PI grads who talked about this idea of fidelity. Treatment fidelity is when an educator implements a program or intervention strictly as it was intended through good quality planning and instruction. It's really that idea of, fidelity is faithfulness, right? How faithful am I to the way it was designed? And the way we think about this, when you and I talk about this, Christy, is in my school, if 80% of the kids are responding to my tier 1 instruction, that good ice cream, I'm doing a really good job. I should be very proud of what I'm doing. But if I see only 50% of my kids reading on grade level, for example, in second grade, I need to ask myself, not what interventions these kids need. I need to ask myself, how do I change that core instruction to get more of this profile of response than this profile of response? And that just sort of makes sense because I want to think about as teachers that assessment informs my instruction and the way that I deliver services, but also tells me about student learning, their rate of growth, their level of growth over time, and how to make sure that each lesson or each unit is in some way taking the way I want to be. I don't think I've said anything crazy. I don't think I've said anything so far that as a teacher, I would be like, well, I'm against that. I don't think so. Maybe you'll give us some feedback. We'll have to tweet about that or tweet about it. I don't know, whatever we're going to do. So that's the first four. Let's just sort of finish with, I think one of the take home messages, Christy, from the article is people talk about MTSS and they talk about RTI and they talk about PBIS, but ultimately we want to think about this as it's not something shoved down into a community. As a Catholic school community, we can say we're interested in problem solving to meet the needs of all of our kiddos. And so MTSS doesn't have to be this one size fits all thing where everybody in that picture there is trying to wear the same size suit. You just don't have to do it. You figure out how this fits in your community. Remember, continuum of inclusion, a journey of inclusion. Where are you right now? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And so I want to think about ways of problem solving so that ultimately I'm not alone in this process, that there's a team of building level leaders involved, that there are teams of teachers looking at that data on a weekly basis, targeted students that we really want to follow up with, and then individualized supports with those last 1 to 5% of students in my school who really need something more. But notice from the first ice cream to right here at the end, all of these tiers are coordinated to help get the students high quality response to instruction.
Absolutely. And I mean, you make it sound so easy when you're outlining those 5 pieces, but what I want folks to understand is that it's an extensive framework and we know to do it right. You just don't jump in and do it perfect from day one, but it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and that's what we're hearing. So I know our friends out there are asking, where do we start? How do we get going? And so I want us to think a little bit about, Cook and Odom put this out really nicely, this implementation science, and they outline these 5 stages to ensure success with a new initiative. MTSS is a new initiative. So organizations progress through a time of exploration to the implementation, all the way to this sustainability. And so I'd like to frame it in the following context. We are going to do it right. We are going to do it right, and then we're going to do it better. So as you can see, this implementation science is divided up, and we can see that during the do it, we're exploring, we're trying to figure out, is my school ready? Where are we? What is the culture? What are teachers saying? So we need to establish this leadership and prepare for success. You need to get some buy-in too. We all know that when a new initiative is brought into the school, teachers tend to say, okay, what now? But we want to make sure that there's buy-in. We know with good buy-in, there's accountability, there's more success. So we're going to figure out, are we ready to do it? And then we're going to do it right. We are going to create that MTSS team, those problem-solving teams who are going to think about, how do we implement? We're going to select the proper data sources and the processes in which we are going to explore how to work kids through those tiered levels and look at that data because, I say it all the time, in God we trust, all others must have data. After we have installed our team and our processes, That's when we're going to determine those kiddos that are at risk. Who is going to need more than that good quality ice cream? We're going to start intervening with those research-based interventions that you spoke about, and we're going to do that progress monitoring across time. We're going to figure out who needs just a bit more. And after we got it installed, we're going to take a step back and we're going to say, what's going well and what do we need additional help with? Because I think the other trick to implementing MTSS in a productive and successful way is we need to provide support. We need to make sure that we're educating our educators, we're giving them professional learning opportunities so that they can continue to grow in the processes and in the things that they need to implement. And then we talk about sustaining. There's that word again, fidelity. So we're going to evaluate, are we doing what we say we're doing? Are we doing it well? Are we doing it the way it was intended to be done? Again, we're going to look at that data and we're going to make improvements, just like we do on the student end. We as educators are going to be looking at it the same way, our own processes with implementation.
It's a big process there, isn't it? I mean, but I think it's really nice that both the way you've just talked about it and in the article, our attempt here is not to say this is easy, but to say that if it's important enough, this is worth trying and worth trying thoughtfully and being patient with yourself as you go through it, recognizing you're embarking on a journey. So grab your loved ones, grab those closest to you in your professional context, and be willing to go forward. I think also it's our responsibility, and we write about this a little bit in the article too, that this is not a panacea. Like, the heavenly house is not going to open. We're going to, it doesn't work, right? But anything of value in our lives usually is work. And I think, quite frankly, as a Catholic school educator who was also, the game day manager, the volleyball coach, and held up my alternate corner of the building on Tuesdays, you're all doing a lot already, and you get hard work. You get the larger mission of Catholic schools. So let's sort of recognize that while it's not a panacea, there is more to it. And I think one of the most sort of take-home messages for me is, the teacher's lounge, right? Like sometimes it was the only safe place in the building where you felt like you could go and be like, all right, what's going on out there? I'm in the last outpost here. But our message throughout the article, and I think throughout any of the speaking that we do, is we don't want you to be alone. The thing about MTSS is it's so integrated that nobody has to be in the last outpost in the West. We want to have more than a support group. We want to have something here that helps everybody feel like their job, the things that they do, are really making a difference. And to do that, I would sort of reflect back on, I'd ask you to think about what's working in your school right now and what's not. And I'll tell you a quick story. In the early 2000s, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded some small learning communities work. They saw that there were these giant high schools, and they said, you know what? We need to split those up, more connections for kids. We'll have better academic learning. That kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't know about you as a teacher, but anytime I would have the opportunity to go from 30 or 35 students in my classroom down to 15, you got to think that's a win, right? I mean, that's sort of what we always ask for. And our administrators say, yeah, sure. And then we try to move forward, right? But what they tried to do here was exactly that idea. They tried to take these large groups of students in every class and use funding from the Gates Foundation to whittle that down. Now, obviously, if you're going to spend that much money, you periodically go in and say, is it working? That's what we would do, very consistent with what we've been talking about. What ends up happening, though, is that they begin to find early on that when we go from these 30 students down to 15 students, what happens to the academic learning? You know, don't you? Because you can hear in the tone of my voice that I'm setting this up, right? Things don't get better. Things actually stay exactly the same. But Mike, how can that be? There's half as many kids in the class. Well, it turned out when they looked at the practices that they were engaging in the classrooms, the students were teaching the 15 students the exact same way they taught the 30 students. In fact, you could have gone up to 45 students and nothing would have changed. So we need to ask ourselves, if we want to change the outcome, what is the thing that we can change? And it's that instruction. And so why do we do that? We can do that for a host of reasons. And we touch on this in our article. Mike Boyle does a great job in his piece. Max Engel contributed to a piece that he and I did. We really look at this call. What is it we're trying to do in Catholic schools? From the Pope here asking us, challenging us in education to think about the relationship, the way we welcome all students, whether they have limitations or boundless potential, they are all our kids. And we think about why do we engage in this challenging process of meeting their needs? Maybe it's part of Catholic social teaching. Those of you who happen to be religion teachers or just Catholic school educators, you know how much this drives what we do. And if we have marginalized kids in our classes, then and in our schools, we need to address those in the margins. I mean, it was Jesus who asked us, go to those in the margins, right? Make sure we meet their needs, because in meeting their needs, we will be able to meet all of the needs of the children in our school. To me, that makes this extra piece really, really fit. And I think they do a lot there. So as I'm sort of wrapping up where I am here, I would say it's sort of time for the moment of truth, Christy, right? We talked about this. We've written the article. We've thought about this. We've shared a little bit of our story. I think for you in the audience now, it's sort of your moment of truth. Maybe not Charlene there with the gun and your scale, but sort of saying to yourself, so how important is it to meet the needs of all of God's children at your school? And we have to be honest, we're pragmatists too, right? We engage with kids, real kids. This isn't theory for us. Some of the times the answer is not yet. We're just not there. Then as a community, I would ask you, revisit the mission and the call of Catholic schools. What is it your school is really trying to do in your parish and in your community? For some of you, you're going to say, look, Mike, this is important, but we don't have any idea where to begin. And I think that's both of these are honest answers, right? So now we sort of step back and say, hold on, then let's have a conversation as a community. What outcomes do we want for our students, all of our students who come through our doors? How do we know if we're achieving those outcomes? Let's sort of ask ourselves, what are the outcomes we know about? And then what's getting in the way? Really powerful questions. We can start to analyze where our growth can be. And then if you've said to this question that, yes, it is so important, it is fundamental to our nature that we meet the needs of all of God's children, including kids with disabilities and kids who struggle, then you are off and running, because you can do some of the things and start ensuring that there's good screening in place so you know where those kids are. Asking yourself, how's our curriculum? How's our instruction? Do we have evidence-based practices? I put that in there as EBPs because Christy and I live and die. If you ask our students, EBPs. Yeah, they're in there. Not because we want to do the things that work. We want our doctors to do that for us. We as professional educators need to make sure we're doing that the very best we can for our kiddos. Then let's progress monitor and see if it works. Let's make sure we've implemented it as it was designed with that fidelity. And then let's get together across teams, building level teams, grade level teams, however you want to do it, all stakeholders involved, and then use that data to reflect on the practices and connect back to the outcomes. Are we getting the things we want? Are we moving in the direction we want? This is going to happen overnight. This is going to be incremental change. Christy talked about that whole process of doing it again, and doing it better. Like that's so important in this process because you got to give yourself the grace to do that. And then once we do those things, we actually start doing it all over again because it's just a process. So maybe it's a good time for you to either pause the video or maybe take these questions back to some colleagues that you care about when you think about kids you care about. And here's 4 questions I'd love you to think about. What are the themes of this presentation, this article of MTSS already present in your school? You're clearly doing some of these things. Second question, a little harder question. How can we research the themes of MTSS not currently present in our school? And we actually give you some suggestions in a moment. Christy's going to talk about the Program for Inclusive Education. I'll talk about omnied.org. And then there's AIR, the American Institutes for Research, that has actually a checklist for essential components of RTI. Like you can just go download it. It's free. The third question, who can we engage in this process? Again, you're not alone. Sure, we're here and we'd love to help you, but also you've got administrators in your school, other teachers, the stakeholders, the people in your parish, grandparents, parents, whoever is involved in the lifeblood of that school. And then as a community deciding, where will we begin? How do we start moving ourselves through these steps? Chris, do you want to tell them a little bit about PI?
Absolutely. So as Michael alluded, there are people and there are organizations out there to help you. We are here to help you. The Program for Inclusive Ed has multiple learning opportunities, and we have a little bit all the way up to, if you want a whole bunch of information, we're here to help. So let me talk about the whole bunch of information first. We have this 18 credit hour licensure program where students actually join a cohort model. They get all the necessary tools. They go back to your schools and become the teacher leader in inclusive education. Michael and I have traveled across the country delivering on-site professional development, as well as our colleague Sean, and we have coached and we have consulted on implementing things like MTSS, working with behavior, those EVPs we talk so much about. Just recently, we launched an online module. It's a virtual module of about 12 hours of self-paced instruction, and you can find that information on our website. But the other thing we're doing is we're putting out monthly blogs, as well as we have a brand new thing. It's a 30-minute virtual webinar, the second Tuesday of every month, called A Little Slice of Pie. And that's what we give you. We give you a little taste of content, and then we open it up for the last 10 to 15 minutes for good conversation with educators across the country, as well as a Q&A. We have free resources on the website, such as this one right here. This one's called Insights for Inclusion, Better Than Pinterest, where our team has outlined all these fabulous websites of those special EBPs. So you can go there and you can see exactly what the research is telling you what to do. You know, as a behaviorist, Michael, I've always said we focus on changing behaviors of our students and our kids at home, et cetera. But sometimes we need to look at our own behaviors. And so when we make the slight changes in our own classrooms, like changing the instruction we do, collecting some more data, talking with someone and problem solving, we can make a huge difference for all students. So what else do you want to tell us about?
I love so much that you're sort of connecting them back to this bigger idea of a community, right? In a multi-tiered system of support, you're not alone. As a Catholic school engaging in this journey, you're not alone. Both the other schools, I'm sure, in your diocese, but also across the country, people are walking this walk, and they're walking it with a similar mindset. So why not engage in that, right? Find folks ahead of you on the road and say, how'd you get there? And maybe it'll speed up your journey as well.
And they're willing to share too. Lots of folks out there.
Oh, so generous, so generous. Along those lines, if we can be helpful to you, Sean and Christy and I have spent some time during the pandemic creating OmniEd, where we talk about All for Education and Education for All, an organization that has a great free blog. It has a set of videos, resources. It's got some checklists for you. We really try and balance between targeting educator resources and then family resources, because we recognize there are things happening at home as well. And we want to make sure that you get access to high quality, inclusive education for all children, and that we're responsive to the needs of the community. So look for those. Go ahead and omnied.org, check out some of the videos. You can see all the different hairstyles and facial hair that we've gone through during the pandemic and try and identify us. It should be kind of fun, and I hope it's very accessible and a great another way for you to reach out. And then, of course, sort of the take home here is that this has been part of a strand at NCA, so that you could look at the special issue that we've just come out with around how do we meet the needs of all kids. Inclusive education is our theme. That was Volume 23, Issue 2 is the winter edition of Journal of Catholic Education. It's free to you. Please look for these other articles plus our own. Use that QR code in the corner to take yourself to this article and notice some really cool stuff in here. There's authors that I hope you'll recognize or come to recognize in the field of Catholic education and disability, but I also hope you'll find colleagues who served as respondents to this special issue. They read our articles ahead of time. They got a sneak peek. And then, like Superintendent of Schools in Cleveland, a classmate of mine, Franco Lynn, he and a colleague read it and then wrote a response. And you get to read that too. Sort of, again, be a pragmatist, push the edge and say to us, how do we do this? They've actually done that for you. So please check out what they have to say. And so in conclusion, this is virtual. We're sorry. We wanted to be with you. I mean, we really, really relish this conference and being with you. We're sorry that we could not be there, but it's simple enough, right? In this digital age, we've been doing this long enough. Please reach out. You can see my email address and contact information there, Christie's as well. And then Pi, go check it out on the web. Spend some time there. Please feel free to download any of those articles from Journal of Catholic Education. They would love to have your traffic. And we'd love to have your questions. We'd love to have your follow-up, your yeah buts, your how abouts. Hey, can we talks? All of those kinds of things that help us to engage with you across the country as you do the most meaningful work of Catholic school education by embracing all of God's children. So any final words, Christy?
Just that we thank you for your time. This is a mission very important to us. And please, when we say we're here to help, we are here to help. Please reach out. So we wish you well and best wishes as you journey through the rest of the NCA conference.
God bless. Thank you so much for your time.